course, Unit 5, Footprint Chart Strategy Development. We're finally going to introduce the template to be utilized throughout Units 6 to 15. This is Challenge Day 6 of 30. So welcome back, guys, to Unit 5. We're finally getting to that last unit just before we start the real practical strategy application. So one more unit to go. Quite an important unit though. We are going to spend a lot of time introducing the template to be utilized throughout the strategies. So do make sure you spend a lot of time in this unit understanding how the template works effectively. So this is day 6 of 10. Tomorrow is that day off that you've all been waiting for. Make sure you obviously go back over some of those principles and have everything fully covered before we start up again on day 8 of 30. Now, where you should be as of right now, well, you should be, we're nearing the end of the first week. You should have a very good understanding of the footprint tool. You should know how to set it up, the basic navigation around the tool. What I would suggest, don't be afraid to click a lot, try new things. That way you're going to very quickly learn how the tool works effectively. Then obviously you should have a very strong understanding now of those principles we dealt with extensively in Unit 3. As mentioned in Unit 3, however, don't worry, because you are going to revisit those principles throughout every single one of the strategy sessions. Okay, so introduce the feedback tool, the feedback loop. Now, some of you might have, that are live members would have heard me talking about this, this unique process. Now, what the feedback loop is simply, a feedback occurs when outputs of a process are routed back as inputs. Okay, as part of a chain of cause and effect that forms a circuit or a loop. This system can then be said to feed back into itself. In other words, as you can see in the graphic, a decision is made. Okay, that's the beginning of the loop. Now, if we obviously get two types of circuits. The first would be a closed loop circuit. Now, a closed loop would, in essence, once we make a decision, there would be no other processes or no other inputs within that loop, and the very next action would be to make another decision. Now, straight away you can see why that can't be a good thing, simply because if we're simply just making decisions and executing, we're never able to really learn and give thought to the decisions we're making. Okay, so the second type of loop is the one we're going to obviously develop over this template, or with this template, is the open loop process. And this is simply a process that we want to create where we have certain pauses or certain inputs that allow us to stop, to review, to assess, to make decisions, etc., etc., before making the very next decision. Okay, so how does it work and how does it apply to trading? Now, the first thing is obviously we make a decision. As we can see in the yellow box, we make a decision, very straightforward. It's simply just a manner of execution. Now, the problem is if we don't have an open loop system, we're just going to end up making a lot of decisions. Okay, more often than not, they're probably going to be bad decisions. Now, once we've made that decision, okay, in order to get a closed loop circuit, we need to have some types of inputs, and the inputs we're going to discuss and develop in this unit are of 3 of the hundreds that you get. Okay, there are plenty of different inputs, but I'm only going to introduce you to 3 because they are extremely effective. Now, the first is an objective fact-based analysis. Okay, so we're going to spend a lot of time developing a fact-based analysis of the footprint charts. I'm going to show you with the use of a template how you want to be analyzing every single one of your strategies in an objective fact-based manner. Okay, now obviously that objective analysis, that would be our first input. Now, once we've obviously created this first input, we then have the second input, which is process development. And the third will be then application of that process development. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the unconscious and conscious in a minute, but the first thing is just to let you know, there are, as I said, hundreds of different inputs that you can develop. As you become more experienced as a trader, you're going to learn what sorts of inputs can ultimately add value to your trading, and you're going to adopt those processes into your loop. Now, Some of the other types of inputs that I have as a trader, and you can consider as well, is, for example, a routine analysis. All right, so I constantly review my routine to make sure that the routine I have is most effective to my ultimate feedback loop. Okay, I then have potential rules, all right, or a rules-based approach. So what this simply means is I have certain rules that I follow, exact rules, so that after I've made a decision, so long as I'm following these specific rules, they will ensure that I can measure the end decision or the end outcome based on, did I follow those rules. Another one is to take away the good and the bad elements and recognize the good elements at the end of every day and recognize the bad. I think sometimes as traders, all we do at the end of the day is we write down what we did bad, we write down what we did good, but we don't ever learn and grow from them. So this is another kind of input that you could develop in your feedback loop. Now, like I said, how this whole process decision making works, it's very simple. Okay, we've made a decision. Now the next process is to have an objective analysis. Okay, so once we've conducted an objective analysis, we then need to go and look at our process development. Okay, so all that a process development is that we want to go and write down all the processes that we did over a period of time within, obviously, before making the next decision, and we want to then go and analyze those processes. Okay, now the reason is a lot of the time within those processes we have there are what we call conscious or unconscious errors. Okay, in other words, we're making mistakes, but we don't even know that we're making those mistakes. Okay, so by having a process development, we can observe these mistakes. Right? For instance, let's say in our objective analysis, we recognize there's trend in the market. All right, now we can very clearly go at the end of the day and say, well, I was fading the market all day, even though objectively there was trend. Therefore, I was making unconscious errors. So we need to go correct that unconscious error. We need to put in place some form of a stop, or some form of a rules-based approach, or some form of a process, so that we can ultimately turn that unconscious error into a conscious error or a conscious correction. So let's look at an example of what an unconscious error could look like. Right? This example is something that probably many of you can relate to. It's impatience. Okay, not waiting for a trade strategy that you've learned, and instead you just impulsively trade the market, or you get sucked into trading what they call flow. Okay, now the first thing to do is we have to create some form of a conscious correction. Now, an example of a conscious correction would be for us to create a list of strategies on a trading sheet, and before you execute, before you make a decision, you have to tick the strategy observed. Okay, now again, a lot of you might say, well, that sounds very, very elementary, but the whole purpose of having a tick sheet where you ultimately tick off the strategy you observed is it's going to create a mental pause. Now that mental pause, that simple, brief second of thought, could be the difference between making a good and a bad decision. Okay, and it's that process that we've just created that effectively becomes the conscious correction. It's a thought, we've given thought to a correction. Now, it doesn't end there. Okay, obviously, you don't just suddenly adopt this new process and become better. Okay, you have to ingrain it into your habits. So again, you probably have to adopt this process for at least 14 consecutive days in order to eventually make the marginal gain. All right, now ultimately that would bring us then to the fourth part, which is the application. Okay, so by adopting this new habit, eventually that conscious correction which you make, where you tick the sheet, eventually that's going to become part of habit, and it will then become an unconscious decision or an unconscious correction. Okay, so it's very simple. We make a decision. We have various inputs. One of them is our daily debrief. That daily debrief will allow us to pick up on certain errors that we make. When we make an error, we obviously consciously recognizing the mistake. We want to develop a process to correct that mistake. So we want to turn that unconscious error into a conscious error, all right, or into a conscious correction. Now, once we've adopted a process through habit, and we've done it over a number of times, a number of days, eventually it will become an unconscious correction. Okay, now Obviously, then you need to rinse and repeat that every time you pick up on certain weaknesses. So this is an ongoing loop. Now, in the next slide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a mentored session that I did all about this feedback loop and some of the process you can adopt with a template debrief. Templating isn't solely a trading thing. You go into any industry, it doesn't matter what the industry is. Is it manufacturing? Is it industry? Is it finance, healthcare? It doesn't matter what the industry is. Every single industry has some form of a feedback loop. Okay. Now, by a feedback loop, what we mean is that if we were to just draw some sort of a graphic, okay, if we were to draw some sort of a graphic, okay, what a feedback loop allows us is once we make a decision, all right, along the path, all right, we don't want what they call a closed feedback loop. Okay, all a closed feedback loop is that once we make a decision, call it decision A, we get this sort of roundabout process where we execute, we get an outcome, and eventually we get back to the starting point. Okay, so a closed feedback loop never allows us to actually stop and look and investigate and make certain changes and ultimately improve. Okay, so what we as traders or what people in industry do, what successful companies do, is they create what we call a stop within the feedback loop, a point where they can stop and make reference. So they can stop the process and say, okay, let's look where we are currently and let's ultimately see if we can improve, make more efficient and progress. Okay, and this is the concept of a feedback loop, okay, a non-closed feedback loop. Now, how this relates to trading and why it's so important to trading is because trading is one of the few disciplines that ultimately it forces us to have closed feedback loops. Why? Well, because from the moment that we click at point A to the moment that we get back around, there's probably another decision that needs to be taken. Okay, so because of the very nature of trading, because it's so fast-paced, and because it merits or it rewards straight away upon exit, we never actually stop within that loop to then try and make efficiencies and progress. Okay, and that's why templating is so crucial in trading. That you have to, that is like one of the 10 commandments of trading. You have to have some form of a process within your feedback loop that stops you so that you can ultimately progress. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to take you through a template, one that I use. I'm going to take you through how it works, and then obviously take you through the nitty-gritty so that you can see the benefits of how this non-closed feedback loop will look at the end. Okay, so the first most important thing, okay, I'm utilizing Footprint within the Evernote, and the first thing to understand is you need to be able to summarize a day. Okay, why? Because within any given day, a number of variables are coming out and what we call noise. Okay, so the first place I like to start is I like to almost just summarize the entire session within a couple of words. Now, obviously this was taken a few days ago, but if I was to just cast my mind back to today, I'll close my eyes and I'll say, okay, well, I came in this morning. There was obviously a little bit of news overnight about the UK, but ultimately the flow is relatively slow. There was nothing really great going on. There's no real correlations going on. The equities were very bid because of the mini S&P. But other than that, there's not been a great deal that I would put into my sentiment overview. Okay, if there was some risk off overnight because of the yen or because of China, then I'd put that in there. Okay, now the reason we do this is because when we can summarize sentiment and overview, what's going to start happening if you summarize it every day, you're going to start to recognize certain patterns. So what do I mean by that? Let's say for all intents and purposes you go back 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Right, there was a period where we were actually seeing a lot of volatility in the Nikkei. Okay, it was ranging within a 2% range, and as a result of that volatility, we were seeing volatility pass over into the European session. So how does that give us an opportunity? Well, if you can recognize this volatility early on and you start to recognize these patterns, you then come in with a very specific frame of mind. Okay, and it's that frame of mind that ultimately gives you that little bit of an edge. It doesn't guarantee success, it doesn't mean profit, but it gives you that little edge on the guy next to you who's not been doing this day-to-day sentiment overview. Okay, so that's where we start. We do a sentiment overview. Then we go and list all the economic data. Why? Again, it's very simple. And I spoke about this, when did I speak about it? I've spoken about it at some point, but if you start to look at the economic data, every single piece, okay, what you're going to recognize is that the markets are sensitive to certain economic data pieces. Okay, the markets sometimes open up, or we get flows once a certain economic data piece is out of the way. And you're also going to notice when data pieces are no longer a valid edge to trade. Okay, so again, you do this because it helps you to develop an edge in and around when we have key economic data. Now, any trader knows that over the course of a week, you are going to have every single week, at least at some point in the week, you're going to have some key economic data. Okay, so again, by templating it, you're going to know when a non-farm payrolls is trending the market. You're going to know when inflation is important. Okay, you're going to know when other data pieces are actually, creating opportunities in and around the data. Okay. Then we then move on, and again, I'm not going to go through this every single time. I want you to get the gist of it so we can get to the real nitty-gritty of it. Right? Then what I like to do is I like to go and list effectively all markets traded. Again, why do I do this? Because I'm creating a pause. Okay, I'm creating that within that feedback loop between when I traded today and when I come in again tomorrow. I want to create some sort of a pause along the way so that I can recognize certain pattern behaviors within my trading. Now, the reason we list all the markets is because for me, I tend to find when I trade multiple markets in a day, i.e. anything more than 4 different markets, I tend to lose money. In other words, there's a high correlation between the more markets I trade to my P&L. Okay, so more markets equals less P&L. Okay, and again, why? Well, because I'm only one human, and obviously I can only see so many things within a day. So the fact that I'm trading multiple markets means I'm probably fishing somewhere, just hoping to get a winner somewhere. Okay, so again, that's why we list the markets. Then, and this is crucial, and again, it's so important, particularly in this closed feedback loop. You go and list every tradable opportunity. Now, by tradable opportunities, I don't mean the hindsight Harry ones. Okay, I mean I know this pattern. I've developed this pattern over the years. Okay, what were the patterns that were available for me today to execute? Okay, not the ones that came up, not the comment that came out. Okay, the ones that I recognized. Bang, we had an outside day. I've known that pattern. I've journaled that pattern for 3-4 months. Okay, which trade opportunities came up today? Now again, why is that important, or where is that important in the feedback loop? Well, again, this is so important for the psychology, okay? Because what a lot of traders do is they sometimes get into a frame of mind that the markets aren't offering opportunity, okay? Now, by listing every single day the opportunities that come out, you're going to start to have a self-belief. It's a reinforcing principle that every single day there's at least one opportunity, okay? Now, if I told you what's the percentage of there being a opportunity every single day, you will know that if you are following this every single day. Okay, and if you know that on average there's at least 2 tradable opportunities every single day, you're not going to rush into the market, you're not going to create certain patterns, you're ultimately just going to wait for those tradable opportunities. Okay, and that's what counts, guys. That's why we create this loop, because let's say you didn't have this loop. Let's remove this loop and see what it would look like if we didn't have this loop. Okay, you would come in, you wouldn't have any loops, right? You've just lost the previous day. You come in, you're a little bit anxious, you're a little bit tight, you're not sure what to do, you're kind of just looking at the market, you're not sure if it's going to give you something or not. Okay, so straight away the mentality is that you're going to be more aggressive, you're going to start fishing early on, hoping for something, and yes, okay, you might get it right, but ultimately you might lose more money. Okay, if you lose money, what happens in terms of psychology? You begin to spiral, you chase even more, and you just double down on your losses. If we put that pause in place, okay, we are losing nothing, but we are only potentially gaining something, which is confidence with our psychology. Okay, so again, this is why we create the pauses in the feedback loop. Okay, then I'm going to go through these really quickly. So we then look at areas of focus. Okay, these are the areas within your own trading that you want to focus on. Okay, and you take them apart. You start off with maybe your discipline. Okay,
Okay, and you go right out. You say to yourself, well, today I was impulsive. There were 3 trades. The guy next to me was like, oh, check the oil out, and I just went and bought it because it was taking out the high. Okay, and you go and you do an honest self-reflection. This is a real, must-do in your feedback loop. Okay, you do an honest self-reflection of what I'm doing. Okay, what I'm doing both, that is concerning and that is affecting my trading. Okay, because if you don't do this area of focus, this honesty test with yourself, well, guess what? You're just bluffing yourself. You're bullshitting yourself. Okay, you're going to come in the next day, so we draw the feedback loop. You're going to come in the next day. You might have taken a winner the previous day. You might have taken a loser, but it's irrelevant, okay, because you're not gaining anything because you're not being honest with yourself about things you need to focus on. So again, what do? We create the pause. We look at things. Am I keeping it simple? Am I disciplined? Am I patient? Am I executing well? Am I averaging? Am I moving stops? Okay, you go through all these areas of focus, you write them out, and you write out an honest self-reflection. Then we talk about achievements, and this is again so crucial in the feedback loop, okay? Because let's say we took a loss, let's say we had a bad day. Okay, I know one trader in mind who said to me yesterday he had a really bad day, one of the worst of the year. And I said to him, most important in every single debrief, firstly, you have to do a debrief. Doesn't matter what the day is, good or bad, win or lose, best or worst day, you have to do some form of a debrief. Okay? And within that debrief, you always have to talk about achievements. Why? Because that brings you back to the planet Earth. Okay? That makes sure that you're recognizing that trading on any given day, right, does not define your career. Okay? Trading is defined by a number of days, a number of years, all right? And it's those achievements that you want to lean on any given day. So, if you came in the morning and you did a really good pre-market brief, write it down. Why? Because when you come in the next day, you say, okay, well, look, these were areas. Yes, I lost money. However, I did a really good morning session. I was really prepared. My routine was good. I came in on time. I did a really good meditation set in the middle of the day, and that made me more balanced. Okay, because it's ultimately the achievements you want to keep doing, and it's the areas of focus that you want to work on. Again, we create another pause in the feedback loop. Then your performance metrics, okay, and this is where it becomes a little more intricate. And you can add, by the way, this is not concise by any means. You can add a whole host of things into a template. Then I like to look at performance metrics. So I like to say to myself, if my goal, okay, for performance metrics, I tend to look at goals. So I say to myself, if my goal is size accumulation, all right, I want to make sure that the way to get better at size accumulation is with a tick box. Okay, so I say to myself, well, if my goal is size accumulation, how am I going to get there? Well, it needs to be gradual, it needs to be deliberate, it needs to be rehearsed, and it needs to be the daily goal I set out for myself. So again, at the end of every single day, I go and say, well, was I gradual in the increments? Was I deliberate? Was I rehearsed? And did it achieve my daily goal? If it didn't, well, guess what? You didn't achieve this goal. So what do? You come back to it again tomorrow and you try and achieve it. Okay, if you did achieve it, you give yourself a big fat tick, and guess what? You come back to it tomorrow again and you try and do it again. Why? Because only then do you start to develop habits. Okay, and you do the same thing. These are just goals that I, set myself. I'm very bad when it comes to doing debriefs. It's ironic I'm actually doing this, this entire templating, because I'm not very consistent with completing my debriefs. Right? Why? Because I'm good at finding 1,001 excuses not to do it. Okay, call it lazy, call it focused on other things, but at the end of the day, this is one of the single most important things for the success of not just me, but for traders. Okay, then I go over level of focus, again, something that I find is crucial to my trading. Right? How is my level of focus in the morning and then also in the afternoon session? Right? Again, there's a correlation. If I have a low level of focus, guess what my performance is going to be? Okay, it's going to be low, not necessarily P&L. Never associate performance with P&L. Okay, performance and P&L are completely separate things. The one does not equal the other. You can perform well and lose money. You can perform badly and make money. Okay, and then obviously level of commitment. And this is something for me internally that when just what I mean by it in essence is when I look at a trade, when I'm coming in and I'm focused 100%, am I committing to taking on what I believe is the right trade, the right strategy? Okay, so again, I go and list it. What is my level of commitment? Was it low, average, or high? Okay, again, there's a high correlation. If I'm highly committed, right, my performance will be extremely high. My focus will probably be very high. Okay, hopefully you're all starting to recognize something, straight away, which is that, i.e., this trader has got certain correlations between the more markets he trades, obviously, his P&L will vary. If he's very focused, he'll perform better. If he has a high level of commitment, he'll perform at a high performance. Okay? And that is why we do a template, because all of a sudden, we've got this big little feedback loop, and we're creating all these markers by which we can come and compare and learn to observe certain patterns about ourselves. And that is ultimately what the art of trading is about. It's about constantly recognizing how you're progressing, constantly ensuring that you're improving by creating every one of these pauses. Okay, that's all the pause is. It's within the feedback loop, ensuring we're allowing ourselves to progress, to grow, to improve, and ultimately make more money. Okay. Now, if that doesn't convince you that this is the bloodline of trading, okay, let's look on the reverse side. I always like to play devil's advocate and say, let's say we remove all of these. Okay, what are we going to gain from not doing a debrief? Okay, we're going to gain a fat zero, maybe 45 minutes a day of our time that we feel is valuable. Okay, compare that to what you'll gain if you do start doing it. Okay, you start to gain all sorts of wonderful things: confidence, trust, self-belief, understanding, patience, skills, all right, and ultimately money. Okay, now you then finish off a debrief with some goals. Very, very important. Keep them simplistic and realistic. Okay, again, the goals just pauses you. If yesterday you had a bad day, you didn't set yourself a goal today, well, what are you trying to achieve? What are you striving towards today? Okay, and again, the mistake a lot of traders make, they want 3 or 4 goals. If I can give you one goal, it could be set one goal every day. If that goal is just to get up the time that your alarm goes off so you can be in the office exactly at 6:30 in the morning, well, that's a very good goal to set yourself. Okay. Also, remember, goals are not just a one-day thing. You don't set a one-day goal. Okay. Goal tends to be at least a couple of days. I'd say, in general, it takes 21 days to form a very solid habit. Okay. So if you want to form a solid habit, you've got to set a goal for 21 days. Okay. Did I get up this morning on time? Yes, I did. Tomorrow, did I get up on time? Yes, I did. Did I get up on time? Yes, I did. Okay. Then we get to the nitty-gritty, and this is where it becomes very intricate. I'm not going to go to this in detail, but then you want to go through your strategy analysis. All right. So you take each pattern, as we observed up top. You take each strategy that you broke down. Okay. You wrote them down. Yeah. Your tradable opportunities. You wrote them down, and you now bring that tradable opportunity into its metric form. What do we mean by that? Okay. Every trade strategy has got a set of characteristics, and we go define those characteristics. Now, I'm going to use the basic example of a flag, because we all know flag, it looks juicy, it makes a lot of sense, and la la la. Now, what we need to do is, within that pattern, we need to recognize and observe that pattern within a number of metrics. Now, again, this is not a concise list, it's an example. Okay? So we want to observe that pattern through volume. We want to note what the volume is: high, low, relatively high, relatively low. Where does the volume come in? We then want to look at it in terms of time. How long does the pattern time to play out? At what time of the day does it take to play out? What does the delta do? What does the cumulative delta do? And what is the relative changes? How does the market shift in terms of volatility, in terms of price response, in terms of price action? Okay, how does the interaction shift between buyers and sellers? And we go through and we ask ourselves this question, and we answer. We say to ourselves, okay, well, within this breakout, I observed there was extremely high volume, and I write it out. And the same thing, I write out the time was this during this event. I look at the delta and the relative change, and I write this all out. And again, why do we do this? Because guess what? You're always going to get breakout trades in the markets. Okay, you had them last year, the year before, and you're going to get them next year and the year after that. Okay. So these characteristics, all we're doing is we're highlighting the key observations of a trade strategy. We're observing them, and ultimately we're starting to build almost an understanding, an in-depth understanding of what creates a good breakout. So again, let's take a step back. Let's just say our feedback loop is here. Let's say today we took out a breakout trade in oil. Okay. And we didn't go through all of this at the end of the day. We just thought, I got it right. Bang, I nailed it. Awesome. Okay? And let's say there was one defining metric in there today that was this really, really high volume, abnormally high. Okay? I'd noted that, over the last 20 of these breakouts, it was abnormally high volume today. It was the highest I've ever seen, and the breakout was incredible. It's like 80 ticks. But I don't go and log that information in my brain. I don't go and physically think about it, give it thought, give it energy, and log it in there for next time. What happens tomorrow if the breakout comes and this time there's low volume? Okay, so we didn't do the analysis. We come back tomorrow, but there's very low volume on this breakout. Guess what we're going to do as instinctive creatures? We're going to come in and we're going to trade that breakout exactly the same way. Why? Because yesterday, our bad habit got reinforced. We got rewarded. Okay, we executed well. We got paid very well. Today, something was different, but we're still going to execute the same way we did, if not more aggressively. And what's the outcome of that going to be? Okay, we're going to lose money. Now, the profound part of that, and this is the most beautiful part. Let's say you had done an analysis and you had recognized over time that when there's a low volume, the probability of outcome goes from, let's say, 80% to like 30%. Now, it's not to say you wouldn't have taken the breakout. Of course you would have, but you would never have taken it with the same kind of conviction as the previous day or with more size. And that's the crux of it. It's that little piece of 45 minutes of time you spent just analyzing that gives you that little edge in decision making in the next opportunity. And that's the crux of templating, guys. It comes down to, in this feedback loop, ensuring that the feedback loop is not closed, because when it is closed off, you are not growing, you're not progressing, and you're not gaining anything. Create some pauses for yourself, okay? You do it in the form of a template, and again, templating is not just for trading. It is for every single industry that you can think of. They all have some form of templating so that they don't have a closed loop system. Okay.
You have a very good understanding of how the loop works and how we navigate ourselves from making unconscious errors all the way to making unconscious corrections. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about identifiers, and again, it's something I have spoken about on one of the periscopes before, but I really want to highlight and drive home the importance of identifiers and why we use them in professional trading. Now, the questions you want to be asking yourself are, what are identifiers? What are some of the basic identifiers that you'll be learning about and utilizing? And why do we need these identifiers? So first up, what is an identifier? Well, it's simple. It's a stencil. Okay, it's a stencil that you apply to the markets daily, which you will fill out in order to recognize patterns. All right, now, put more simply, it's an exact created process to follow to determine deviation. So every single day, you're going to follow a step-for-step process. You're going to fill out like an informational form. And by doing that, you're ultimately suddenly going to start to develop when there are deviations from what you expect. Okay, now those expectations I'm going to teach you when we go through each one of the strategies. I'm going to show you what is the expectation, what should you be seeing, and you will then very quickly pick up when those deviations are occurring and ultimately learn from those deviations. Now, we follow certain identifiers every day, okay, to recognize pattern changes so that we can formulate new trade strategies, right? That's why we don't stop following the identifiers. We're always watching the identifiers to learn when potentially new patterns are developing. Now, one of the best examples of an identifier is volume. So let's take, for example, over the last 10 trading sessions, you've suddenly recognized that whenever the volume exceeds, say, 50,000 contracts, you've recognized that price tends to very aggressively fall or rise. Okay. Now, if you've noticed this, you've recognized a pattern based on the identifier of volume. Therefore, if tomorrow or the day after suddenly you see 50,000 contracts come into the market, you know that you need to be getting onto that trend and following the market in the direction of price. And that's what the identifier is all about. It's all about you recognize a pattern based on the identifier, you understand, interpret, learn, create a strategy around that pattern so that when those identifiers crop up again, you simply just execute on the objective information. Okay, so what are some of the basic market identifiers? Firstly, volume, volatility, stops, time, relative changes, as well as the delta. These are, the identifiers we're going to use quite extensively, not just through, not just when I introduce them to you in the next couple of slides, but also when we move our way through units 6 to 15, we're going to extensively cover these in every single one of those chapters. Okay, now Why do we need identifiers? That's probably the question on your mind, you know. Well, firstly, to develop a consistent approach to view the markets and therefore develop a consistent strategy to execute in the market, right? That's what it all boils down to, is that when we have an exact process, you've got to think of that exact process like following a recipe in a cookbook. Okay, if you follow the recipe from, you know, number 1 to number 10, the outcome is going to be favorable. Okay, and that's the important thing. That's why we develop a consistent process or a consistent approach, because it will then allow us to develop consistent strategies, but more importantly, consistent performance. Now, one of the biggest fallacies I find, you know, in trading is that you need multiple approaches to become successful as a trader. Okay, what I'm going to tell you now, and I'm going to reiterate this when we get to the strategy section. You only need one strategy, guys. You only need to be successful at one strategy. Okay, the example I always use and I mention is if you look at the likes of Apple as a company, right? Apple is extremely successful. They are one of the wealthiest companies in the world, and Apple produces the same iPhone X in the same workshop with the same process, with the same you know, tools, same machinery, and it takes the same amount of time. Everything is the same. Okay, they simply follow a step-for-step process to develop the iPhone X. Now, it's no different for us as traders, okay? We simply have to follow a process step for step for step. If we do that with one strategy, maybe 2, maximum maybe 3, we can be very successful. Okay, the whole art to trading is to find 1 or 2 strategies, really master them, and leverage them up. Just like Apple does, they leverage up the amount of products they're producing, you know, with one simple process. Okay, now note, obviously, we need these identifiers because obviously with a consistent approach or with these identifiers, you can obviously recognize new patterns. Okay, so it's a way of developing your pattern base. And then obviously lastly, with these identifiers, you can ultimately make corrections to a consistent approach, but with a sporadic approach, however, where you're just looking at things, putting in lines, etc., it's very difficult to make any kind of meaningful adjustments, okay, that'll ultimately have any impact. So that's how you got to look at it. When you're following a step-for-step process, where you know, just looking at the identifiers and making reference, you're following a very simplified process, which is going to give you a very, very impactful amount of information, and that's what it comes down to. Now, what we're going to talk about on the next slide is I'm going to finally introduce this template that we're going to use through units 6 to 15. Now remember, this template is in effect a process that ensures we don't have a closed loop. Okay, like I said, this was, you know, point 2 of the loop. The first point was we make a decision. The second point is that we have a very conclusive template that will ultimately allow us to move ourselves from making unconscious errors to making unconscious corrections. So the template looks a little bit like this. There are 3 unique sections: observation, identification, and execution. Now, within each of these sections, we're going to cover a variety of identifiers. But the template ultimately follows a very chronological order from firstly observing the necessary conditions for a strategy to exist in, then identifying the strategy, which I'll be teaching you one of the 10, and then lastly the execution in a dynamic manner of that strategy, with key focus on you know, trade management. Now, let's view each one of these sections on its own and have a look at some of the identifiers within each section. So under the observation, we have 2 sub-indexes. The first is obviously pre-context and pre-condition. So this is the state that you want to find the market in. It's the market conditioning, or the trade location, or the market context. This is the kind of thing you want to be thinking of in terms of observation. Now, these observations ultimately show us the prime conditions in which a certain strategy can exist. So some of the identifiers we'll focus on are the time frame participants, the market context, the trade location, as well as volatility. Now, once we've observed the potential pre-context or preconditions, we then move on to how to identify, or the identification of one of the 10 unique strategies you're going to learn. Now, obviously, these will be effectively the strategy identifiers or the characteristics of each strategy. So some of the identification parameters are momentum and counter trend, passive aggressive flow, volume, time, flow, delta, and relative changes. Then once we've obviously identified one of the 10 strategies, we then focus on the execution identifiers. So what identifiers can we utilize to ensure we're effectively executing? And those will include things like entry, timing of execution, stop placement, target placement, risk reward, as well as leveraging and how to leverage. Now, in the next slide, we're going to discuss how you'll complete each one of these sections that is provided in the template. So this is what the template is going to look like. This is obviously the first section of the template you're going to complete. But very simply, before we move on to that, how does it all work? Okay, well, first thing you need to do is you obviously need to download from the LMS system, where the course is. You need to go and download the form that says Footprint Tool Template. Okay, now this tool is an A4 page, so it'll include all 3 sections on it. I will show you what that looks like right at the end of this unit. But download that, make a couple of copies. You are going to fill this in every time we go through one of the strategies. You're going to fill it in with me. Then at the end of each strategy unit, when we do the live example, again, you're going to fill it out. And then when I give you your drill sessions, you're going to fill out another one. So for every single one of the 10 strategies, you're going to fill out one form. And every time you find that strategy in the live market, or when you're practicing the drill, you're going to fill it out again and again and again. Okay, so you're going to become, by the end of the course, you're going to fill out a lot of these templates, but you're going to recognize how important and how valuable the templating is. Now, just bear in mind, guys, there is no right or wrong. Okay, this template can be filled out in whatever way you want. It's just giving you a manner in which you can construct your thoughts in a very simplified manner, but also in a very constructive way. Now, why I like this form so much is because you're going to be observing purely facts. Okay, you're not viewing opinions, you're not writing down anything other than the facts that you're extracting from the market. So I'm going to show you how to complete the template and ultimately extract the facts from the market, and then how to make decisions based on those facts. Now, important, you can apply this to any time frame. Okay, it doesn't matter what time frame you're trading within. It doesn't matter if you're trending or not, right? You can do it over a market that's been trading for the last 3 days, or a market that's been trading for the last couple of minutes. All right, this can be applied to any one of the 10 strategies in any time frame. Okay, now, the first thing we need to look at, and as you can see in front of you, this is the strategy observation section. Now, you can very clearly see on the left side, on the left box, we've got market context, and on the right box, we've got market conditioning. Now, these are the 2 sub-indexes of strategy observation. Now, bear in mind, as I mentioned earlier, this is nothing more than the preconditioning of the market in which we want to trade, because this is the prime conditions to execute our various trade strategies within. Now, the first thing you're going to do is, let's say you've observed strategy number 6, absorption and auctioning. The first thing you're going to do now is come and complete the question. So the first thing is the market trending or is it consolidating? And you'll simply circle it. Then, is the market balanced or imbalanced? And you'll circle it. Then the trade location. Where are we trading? We're trading in the previous day's value area, we're trading at the extremes, or we're trading outside of the range. Where are we trading in terms of price? So that'll give us a little bit of understanding about the market context. Then, in terms of market conditioning, we want to talk a little bit about what are the time frame participants. What are we seeing? Are we seeing a lot of noise from algorithms? Are we seeing large, big orders come into the market? Or are we just seeing a lot of passive, responsive type orders coming into the market? So that's what we'll talk about in terms of time frame participants. In terms of liquidity, is there a lot of liquidity? Are the market conditions quite thin? And then volatility, is there volatility or not? Okay, so Once you've done that, you've effectively, completed the first part of the template, which is the strategy observation. So once you've observed the conditions for the strategy, what's going to happen is over time you're going to develop a very strong understanding of the prime conditions in which your strategy will work. Okay, by doing this every single day, you're going to very quickly recognize, when, for instance, a breakout trade works well, or when, a hiding behind the elephant trade strategy works well. Just by doing this, you're going to very quickly learn to understand the prime conditions. And ultimately, what that's going to lead to, is you're going to recognize when there's higher probability conditions and when there's lower probability conditions in play. Now, on the next slide, we're going to identify what are some of the identifiers you need to recognize to show you that your trade strategy is in play. Now this is the second section to the template that you're going to complete, and this is effectively the strategy identification. So these are the identifiers that you will need to recognize in order for one of the 10 strategies to be in play. Now, the first thing to look at is the two subsections, which is interaction and then the metrics. In terms of interaction, we're going to focus on was there initiative or responsive type price action? Was there passive or aggressive type price action? So it's the real interaction between the buyers and sellers that we're going to focus on. Then we're going to talk a bit about metrics. Some of the metrics we're going to focus a lot of attention on in the template is volume, time, the delta, the cumulative delta, as well as the relative changes. Now, once you've observed this interaction and the metrics, you will learn the interaction required for the chosen strategy to work well, as well as the accompanying metrics to guide you in the decision-making process. Now, we're going to then move on to the execution part of the template in the next slide. So the third section of the template is all about strategy execution. Again, the two subsections will include money management as well as the application or the decision-making process. Now, some of the factors to consider, or the identifiers we're going to consider with regards to money management, will include passive or aggressive execution, risk stop placement, target placement, as well as the risk reward. And then in terms of the application side, timing, whether we're preemptive or exact, as well as leveraging, or better known as pyramiding. Now again, as mentioned in the previous slides, the whole reason we do this is that over time, through completing this, you're going to learn what the best methodologies for execution are based on each strategy. For example, sometimes people pyramid without pyramiding in the right type of trade strategy, and ultimately all this does is skew the risk and destroy the probability of success. So this template is going to allow you to determine when do you want to leverage, when do you not want to, when do you need to be aggressive in your execution, when do you need to be passive. Let's view the template in its entirety before we close out the unit. So on the right side of the slide, you can see pretty much what the template looks like. Obviously by this stage, hopefully you've downloaded it. If you haven't, it is provided for you on the LMS system. Now, the first thing is I just want to briefly go through some of the elements that weren't spoken about. The first is the first section, which you can see at the top of the template. And you can see that obviously it says the trade strategy. So first thing is write down what is the trade strategy. You can write it down, or you can select it from one of the 10 boxes. Circle it. Nice and easy. Circle the strategy, but then more importantly, go and draw the strategy. This is so crucial. As human beings, our brains tend to hold on to picture images a lot easier than text. So go draw it, use different colors, annotate it, personalize it, really make it your own drawing. That way you're going to remember it a lot easier. Now do note, obviously, every time we do one of the 10 strategies, you're going to fill this out. Every time you recognize one of the 10 strategies in the marketplace whilst practicing, I urge you to complete it. It is there for your benefit ultimately. Now, If we go to the bottom part of the template, you'll notice 3 boxes in the bottom left. Now, don't worry if you can't see it here. Obviously, you will have an A4 PDF page of this document. But in the bottom left-hand side, there's 3 things written there, and that's what I call the accountability section. Now, it includes the time, the habit/30, and a sign. And all this is saying is that, firstly, write down the time. How long did it take you to complete this? The reason being is that a lot of you are going to find this rather monotonous and time consuming initially, but if you write this out every single time, you're going to very quickly realize how quick you can get at completing this. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, obviously, it says habit/30. Again, if you want to get good at completing this and you want to develop real habits with this template, write out the days. How many days out of 30 have you completed this? Again, I urge you to try it for a 30-day period. Write day 1, day 2, day 3, every single time you complete it. Complete and build that habit through consistently completing the template. Then the last is signing off, and this is crucial. This is signing off that you've done a complete debrief, and you've done it to the best of your knowledge, and you giving it your stamp approval. Okay, it's so important you do this. Again, you might think it's silly, but it really does hold you accountable to completing the document. All right, now obviously you can do this electronically, or you can write it down. Do note, guys, that habits take time to form. Okay, what I am going to say is, if you want to get good at this template and you really want to build consistency in your trading, you're going to need to complete this every day. All right. Now, don't worry, like I said to you, there is no right or wrong, okay? This is a situation of the perfect imperfection, where, you might want to initially write down everything perfectly and try and get every answer right and perfectly get it right, but it's not about being perfect. It's just about forcing you to think, forcing you to write down your fact-based observations. And over time, if you write these down, eventually you're going to become very perfect at your trading, even though you were doing imperfect observation analysis. Okay, and then obviously, motivation is a crucial part. I know it can be time consuming, so just remain, motivated. Keep reminding yourself of the big picture, which is that if I do this for 30 days, I build consistency, I become profitable, and I get one step closer to my dream of becoming a professional trader. And then last, if you do miss one, it's okay. Right? Don't put a backlog of days that you need to fill out. Skip it. Move on to the next one. Let bygones be bygones. Okay? Don't hang on to old forms to complete. Otherwise, what's going to end up happening is you're just going to create anxiety. You're going to feel stressed rather than actually getting on with the job at hand. Now, note, you will get quicker over time, guaranteed. Take this from where it comes, from experience. You will get quicker at filling this out over time. All you need is to understand that as you do it daily, as you observe your thoughts daily, you're going to get better and quicker at observing them over time. Now, note, there's one thing I can finish off with, this template is probably my greatest gift to you throughout this course. It's not all the information you're going to get, but it's this exact process. I can, I don't want to use the word guarantee, but I can give you a really strong sense that you will develop a real good understanding of how important a processed approach is by doing this template. More importantly, I think you're going to want to go and create your own processes, your own recipes for success once you've done the course. So please accept this gift and really make the most of it, because it will benefit your trading, not just in terms of consistency, but definitely overall performance. And then lastly, just remember, there's a lovely quote at the bottom of that template, and the quote just simply says, "The successful person is the individual who forms the habit of doing what the failing person doesn't like to do." Okay, humans don't like to observe themselves. We don't want to fill out forms and write out stuff and bog ourselves down with all sorts of information. All right, so if you are willing to do it, you are going to succeed. That brings us then to the end of Unit 5, the end of the theoretical section per se. We're now going to move on to the strategy section, and we're going to build those 10 unique strategies.